How will we power our future? Can we create a healthy and clean economy? Climate One at the Commonwealth Club is at the forefront of the global debate about energy, economy, and the environment. Bringing together the brightest and most provocative leaders of our time, Climate One is the place where big ideas get heard. With thoughtful and insightful discussions on policy, business, science, and culture, Climate One founder Greg Dalton gets to the heart of the matter. It's our future. It's time to come together.
Today on Climate One, 2017 brought a raft of extreme weather disasters costing the U.S. hundreds of billions of dollars in damages, including Hurricanes Harvey, Irma, and Maria. The mayors of 3 cities on the front lines of climate change, Houston, Miami, and Columbia, South Carolina, join us to discuss what their cities are doing to recover, rebuild, and prepare for the next megastorm. Climate One starts now. Mayor Turner, let's begin on August 25th, 2017, when a megastorm is making landfall in Texas. You're facing decisions, evacuate or not. You have to be thinking about the ghost of Katrina. So take us back to that day and what you were thinking about and what, just where you were on that day.
On August 25th, I was at the HEC Center, our emergency center, command post. In fact, we were monitoring the storm very, very closely. A couple of days before, we didn't quite know where it was going to hit. And then they informed us that it was going to hit not along the Houston area, but further down south. And it was not going to be the hurricane hitting Houston, Harris County area. It was going to be a water event for us. A lot of rain, but didn't really anticipate how much. It was no time to try to evacuate anyone. When the city did evacuate back in 2005, number one, if you're going to evacuate, there's a lot of preparation that you have to take into place. You got to make sure that there's adequate fuel supply along the evacuation routes. When we did it in 2005, about 120 people died on the freeway, because the freeways were like parking lots. You literally could go and get you a hamburger, come back, and you were still in the same place. So we decided to just keep people in place, but to have some pre-positioned shelters just in case we needed them. On Friday, the hurricane landed about 10 p.m. On Friday, things were good in Houston, Harris County. On Saturday, things were still pretty good. On Sunday, at about 5 p.m., the National Weather Report indicated to us that there were 3 bands coming in, and each one of those bands would carry anywhere between 7 to 9 inches of rain. That's when we knew things were going to get bad. And so it was at that point in time we started getting people out of the low-lying areas and getting them into shelters. The first band came through. They were right, 7 to 9 inches. Second band came through, another 7 to 9. The third band came through, and that's when water came out of all of the bayous, and that's where the heavy flooding took place.
And were you thinking about climate at that time, or you didn't have time to think about why? You're just thinking about, boy, we got to deal with this water and these people. Was there a climate connection to at that point?
Well, that was a climate connection. Just didn't start there. I mean, anybody who's been keeping up with all of this knows that we have a climate problem. It's real. The science is real. So it didn't just become real on August the 25th. It was real before. Bear in mind, in the city of Houston, we flooded in 2015. It was the Memorial Day flood. And then on April the 17th of 2016,
flood day.
It was the tax day flood, and then this one here on August 25th, of course, was Harvey, and more rain fell on the city of Houston and the region than on any other city at any point in time in United States history, and it ended up being the second most costly natural disaster for the country.
Yeah, it's tied with Katrina, I read.
Right.
Yeah, Mayor Suarez, you came into office in November, and in your victory speech the night you won election, you talked about jobs, transit, crime, housing, and climate. I don't think many mayors mention climate in their victory speech.
Yeah, we are ground zero for resiliency and climatic events that affect our quality of life. And I think what we're seeing is other parts of the world and other parts of the country are using that as sort of a counter brand against the city of Miami. And so they're saying, yeah, the city's great, the low taxes, whatever, but don't go there because you're going to be underwater. And so as mayor and as a father, I have a 4-year-old and a baby girl that's on the way. Certainly it's a concern that that it's going to impact impacts us on the short term. It impacts us in the medium term, and certainly, of course, you wonder and you worry about the existential threats to the long-term viability of the city. So, for me, I felt, and we passed right in my election what they called a Miami Forever bond, which was in part a resiliency bond, where our voters did something very unusual. They voted to tax themselves because the issue is so acute and it's so macro that, they voted to create $200 million of resources for us to begin meaningfully dealing with our climatic events, which include a range of things from king tide flooding to tidal surge during hurricanes to annual rainfall that is significantly greater than what we've experienced or what we have a capacity to experience. So I think any mayor responsibly should have made this and should make this a major priority, particularly if you're the mayor of Miami.
Right.
Mayor Benjamin, you're head of the National Conference of Mayors. Tell us how climate, is it only sort of these frontline cities that are thinking about climate change, Miami, Houston? As we look around the country, where does climate rank in terms of traditional concerns for mayors, potholes, jobs, housing? Does climate really rank?
It ranks very high, and I am the incoming president. The president of the U.S. Conference of Mayors is our friend Mitch Landrieu. I'll be president in May. Okay. I just want to make sure Mitch doesn't call me when we leave here and get me straight. It ranks very high. Climate Mayors Caucus, well over 300 mayors signed up. I'm also helping lead as one of the co-chairs with the mayor of Salt Lake City, the mayor of San Diego, and Mayor Suarez is a former neighbor, the former mayor of Miami Beach, Philip Levine, mayors for 100% clean energy, those of us who are committed be ready for 100 by 2036. We're making commitment to clean and renewable energy. We've been joined by 200 of our colleagues all across the country who recognize, the reality what you hear from Mayors Turner and Suarez is that Washington, D.C. may dilly-dally at times, and some of that dysfunction is state government policymaking or the lack of policymaking. But mayors have to get the job done every single day. And that's regardless of party, regardless of geography. I'm not a coastal city. We are as inland as you're going to find. Our city was birthed with a broad and saluted rivers formed the Congaree back in 1786. We were not prepared for what we saw on October 4th, 2015, a 1,000-year event. What happens when after weeks of rain, when 11 trillion gallons of water falls onto the Carolinas over a period of just a couple of days. We saw, as you mentioned, 45 dams break, almost 600 roads destroyed. We lost 19 precious lives on the second day of our event. The levee that provides our Columbia Canal, which supplies water, our primary water source for all of downtown and southeast Columbia, the levee wall was breached and immediately sent us into crisis mode. Now, we've been doing, as most mayors we've been preparing for a number of different eventualities, just investing in infrastructure. All across this country, 75% of all the infrastructure being delivered is being delivered by state and local governments using primarily tax-exempt municipal bonds.
Mayor Suarez, you mentioned, that Miami residents have taxed themselves for 200. I thought it was 400. That's still a drop in the bucket. Where's the more money going to come from?
We're already living with some of these climatic events. And so for us, it's not about a debate as to whether sea level rise is a true or not true phenomenon or to what extent it's going to affect us. We have a very porous subsoil. So we have water that percolates upward in dry king tide flooding.
So a levee's not an option for you. A seawall's not an option for you.
So a seawall alone is not an option. I think, what happened in Miami Beach did a fairly good job, but I think they did it under what I call sustainability 1.0, we're sort of learning from Miami Beach. They did some things that we think are replicable and some things that we think were mistakes. And so, you have to learn from that. I think everything in life and dealing with a macro problem such as this, happens in phases. So we're blessed to get from the legislature a little over $1 million to update our stormwater master plan to take into account sea level rise. That was sort of the first thing that we did. And then we got our residents. It was a $400 million package, but it was not all dedicated to resiliency. It was $200 for resiliency, $100 for affordable housing, and $100 for cultural facilities, which are part of really the resiliency concept. Is not just a climatic concept. It's a concept of having a city that is more resilient to all kinds of shocks. One of the things that we saw during Hurricane Irma was just how fragile our electrical grid was. And I mean, obviously, when you see what's going on in Puerto Rico, where they have, been without electricity for months, the city of Miami, 80% of the city was without electricity after Irma. And it took about 12 days for us to get back to about 95%. But, on day 9, it gets real. It's like the program Walking Dead. I mean, it's really, really, people are at each other. By that point, food has spoiled. If you don't have a generator, and a lot of our poor areas people don't have generators. I mean, I gave my generator away to a public housing project where they relied on electricity to power their wheelchairs to get to the 3rd floor apartment. So, for us, we're dealing with these phenomenon, but I do agree that $200 million is a starting point. And I think, when we start analyzing this problem in a way that is reflective of the fact that other cities have begun trying to address this issue, we realize that it's a much more pervasive and comprehensive problem, which is going to require much more comprehensive solutions. After Hurricane Andrew, I always say, we gave the world the gift of wind resiliency after Hurricane Andrew. Hurricane Andrew had sustained winds in excess of 200 miles an hour. And we changed our building codes, and all our buildings built post-Andrew can sustain, incredible wind loads. But our new challenge is to be the most water resilient city on the planet. And I think, post Irma, we saw tidal flooding or tidal surges that went 4.5, 5, 6 blocks in with 3.5 foot of flooding. Now, the good news was that a lot of that water receded fairly quickly, but it still highlights how dramatic the problem can be and how much damage it can cause to your city.
Mayor Turner, you came from the state legislature in Texas. How has Harvey changed the conversation? Greg Abbott, the governor of Texas, not particularly inclined to talk about climate change. Did you talk about it in different language, as Mayor Suarez was saying?
I don't know if we talk about it in different languages. I think climate change has a way of making things bipartisan. And what I mean by that, when we flooded in 2015, there were certain geographical areas that were flooded, primarily in the poor areas. The tax day flood on April 17th of 2016, about the same. And so there were other areas were still high and dry. But Harvey said, let me be indiscriminate. And so when Harvey came and 51 inches of rain fell, if you were in poor neighborhoods, you're already on the margins, you got pressed down, you flooded. If you were in the affluent communities, you really flooded.
Sugarland too, yeah.
So from the northwest to the northeast side of town, you flooded. It didn't say you're a Republican neighborhood, so we're going to bypass you.
Exactly.
It came down. And so now you have all of these families and all of these neighborhoods that have been adversely affected, and they don't want to flood again. And then you want the city to continue to grow. You want people to continue to be proud of where they live. You want people to come. We are Houston is the energy capital of the world, a lot of oil and gas companies. But at the same time, you have a lot of oil and gas companies in the city of Houston that recognize that we need to focus now on renewables. that we need to do some other things to be more resilient, because we still want people to come and be a part of our city. And that's a good thing. So from my vantage point, what I say to people and to the, yes, the city of Houston is a blue city. But if you take the blue city out of the red state, then you come to a standstill. And we have to focus on results. It's all about results and meeting people's needs. So I think the reality is, because of Harvey on so many levels, people recognize that you cannot ignore things any longer. Their constituents are not going to allow them to ignore things, and we have to build a much more resilient city. And if they don't help us to build a more resilient city, it's their constituents that's going to hold them accountable for that.
I spoke to a former president of an energy company based in Houston, very large, who did not vote for you, but said he probably will next time because of the way you've handled Harvey. But Mayor Benjamin of Columbia, South Carolina, density is good for reducing greenhouse gases, reducing traffic, but getting to density means getting across NIMBY. People don't like high rises in their neighborhoods. So how do you convince people that density is good when they don't want more people in their neighborhood? They don't want a high rise blocking their light, that sort of thing. That's a tough sell.
We deal with it every single day in downtown Columbia. Some of you know our history is one of the last few places that General Sherman visited. And I tell people our dominant architectural style is post-Shermanesque. Burned every single thing down in 1865. So there are some certain vistas that people can enjoy from the river facing our state capitol in downtown Columbia. I think this is one area in which mayors are uniquely able to dialogue with our citizens. As I visit our friends in Washington, I know all three of us spend a great deal of time on a regular basis. Sometimes it seems like the discussions there are just removed from reality. I see our citizens in church, and when we visit synagogue or mosque, I see them at the grocery store, at the traffic light. I get advice and counsel from our citizens. The ability to talk about tough issues is sometimes lost, I think, on some of our federal representatives. I can talk to our citizens about hundreds of thousands of new jobs in clean energy. I can talk to them about how we help their children deal with asthma, the opportunity to lower their power bills by dealing with solar energy. We can talk about the benefits of vertical development and what it means in terms of tax base, that this one 300,000 square foot building downtown produces more tax revenue than a 300-unit subdivision in the outskirts of town, without the environmental disruption, physical disruption to build infrastructure to get there. And by the way, 63 cents of every dollar that comes in goes to the school district to help provide opportunities for kids all across our city. There's an argument around urban, smart, sound, dense urban development surrounded by strong neighborhoods. And in cities like ours, in 15 minutes, you can be in the rural hunting for boar or fishing for bass if you want to. But there's an argument to be made, but that's a face-to-face conversation that mayors have every single day. And I think we tend to be uniquely qualified to have those conversations.
Mayor Sylvester Turner of Houston, I have to admit, I was surprised when I saw that you were leading a group of mayors supporting the Paris Climate Accord, being, Houston oil and gas companies. A lot of those oil and gas companies are trying to slow down the transition to a cleaner energy economy. So why are you back in Paris supporting the Paris Climate Accord that the U.S. is now trying to walk out of?
Well, number one, it's the right thing to do. That's number one. Number two, and number two, we all want to leave a world better than the world that we inherited. Okay, and so that's important. The science is real. We do need to make changes. And coming from Houston, the energy capital of the world, we recognize that you can't just continue to do things the same old way and expect something different. That's not going to take place. And so it's in all of our best interests. And quite frankly, when you look at renewable energy and solar, there are more jobs created in that arena than in the old traditional arena. So And then when we look at the fact that we are all trying to build a more resilient city, what we want in the city of Houston, we want a stronger, more resilient city. And I don't think there's a better place to be able to make the argument that you can be the energy capital of the world, and you can also place a great deal of emphasis on recognizing that there's climate change and looking at alternatives and making your city stronger and resilient. And the two don't necessarily have to be at odds with one another. And that's what we're trying to demonstrate in the city of Houston.
Mayor Suarez, a lot of your party, Republicans, are doubting Paris, trying to pull out of Paris. Where are you on Paris, and how is it relevant to Miami?
I'm very much in favor of being a completely energy independent city. I think that we're going there irrespective of what anyone believes, and the reason why is because before it used to be sort of an existential environmental argument, and I think now it's becoming an economic argument. I mean, you have a situation where it's the largest power plant in the solar system is the sun. And so, our ability to harness that power is becoming so inexpensive that it would be foolish for people not to do it. I mean, at this point, I have, and by the way, not only that, but I supported a program in Miami called the PACE program, which allows you to do energy efficient retrofits to your home and put it in your tax bill, and it pays for itself. So you put solar panels on your home. We're a very sunny city, obviously. So I can't speak for every city in the United States, but you put solar panels on your home, and you are almost essentially off the grid, and that's irrespective of the fact that there's no battery capacity right now. I mean, once battery technology comes on board and you can store energy in your home, I mean, it's game over. I would not be investing in gasoline companies or oil companies. I wouldn't. I would not advise anybody to invest any money, with all due respect to my mayor. I just think it's not even about at this point, fortunately or unfortunately, however you want to look at it. It just so happens that it's a great environmental argument, but the economics of it are so dramatic that I really feel that, and so I think it's a beneficial thing because obviously we as a city, and I think as a country and as a world, want to be harnessing energy that is renewable and harnessing energy that is not going to negatively impact our ability to live. So we're trending in the right direction, and I'm in favor of it.
Let's go to our audience questions. Welcome to Climate One.
Thank you for having me. I want to first applaud you for having such diversity on your panel. Climate and resiliency does not look like what's on stage. I want to acknowledge that this is a great accomplishment. I'm David Capelli. I wanted to ask each of the mayors here, how are you engaging and working with diverse millennials on these poignant issues so that we have more diversity and actually solving these problems for the most vulnerable populations in each of your cities?
Who'd like to tackle that first? Mayor Suarez?
I'll start. I was actually invited by the conference a couple of weeks ago to speak on a millennial mayor's panel. So I didn't realize that I was still a millennial. I'm 40, so I don't know. I think I'm on the cusp. but I think everybody on my staff is a millennial, on my mayor staff. But no, I think it's great to have people like Dave in our community who are constantly pushing the envelope. And I think I forget who was saying it. Technology and the knowledge-based economy is sort of the macroeconomy of where we are right now. And so, as a city, we are in a global competition for survival in that reality. And so, I think as mayors, we have a duty to pay attention to all the different segments of our society. I think you get a tremendous amount of wealth of knowledge and energy and ideas from the millennial generation. And so I've probably taken a little bit of heat as mayor because all my entire staff is millennials essentially. But the truth of the matter is it's a very hardworking, idea-driven, passionate generation. So it certainly inures to my citizens' benefit. And so that interaction is daily for me.
Mm-hmm. Mayor Turner?
Yeah, I think it's important you have to include millennials at the table of decision making. And I know when I ran for office, my daughter, who's 30 years old, and said, "Dad, when you become mayor, don't forget about us. You know, you can't talk about building a city for the future if the future is not sitting at the table today." And I take that very seriously. And so part of what I've done, a significant part, is to place millennials at the table of decision making so that they can advocate and include their ideas. There's a millennial conference, for example, in the city of Houston that's taking place on this coming Saturday, which I look forward to being a part of that and being with them. And again, you know, what I say to people is that from an age-wise, I may be a little bit older than Mayor Suarez. But that doesn't mean
much wiser, though.
But that
much
doesn't
wiser.
mean that you don't have ideas that can relate and be a part of the millennial generation. So, but you have to include people. You can be diverse, but diversity doesn't necessarily mean in terms of ethnicity or language or religion. Okay? Right. So diversity is come in many different forms, and you have to include that diversity at the table of decision making so that they can advocate for themselves.
Yep. Amen.
Mayor Benjamin.
My entire staff is millennials, and I think continuing to push diversity and inclusion, making sure, again, inclusion, right, that we're all need to be at the table of every persuasion, helps us make better decisions. Honestly, I think that's what makes San Francisco great. Sometimes people feel like in Silicon Valley we're in a bubble up here that is not diverse. Yes, a lot of work needs to be done up here to make sure that looks more like the rest of the country. But I think what makes this area great is in fact the diversity of ideas, and that maybe since the gold rush, people are not afraid to come here and try an idea and fail and start all over again. And it's encouraged in this environment. I think that type of diversity in ideas makes this place stronger, and hopefully we can replicate that other places around the country. That's why we're here.